Crushed with sorrow. How do you feel facing an upcoming test or an exam? Does anybody look forward to that? What about going to the dentist for fillings or to hospital for surgery? Hands up if you look forward to that. Oh, it's funny, it's the same as first service. No one put their hand up there either. I wonder why, yeah. Friends, every one of us will face some trials that leave us reeling. It might be being bullied at school or assaulted somewhere in public. It could be a mental or physical health crisis. It might be the breakdown of a relationship or a marriage. It could be the loss of a job or the inability to find a meaningful job. It could be a serious motor accident or some other accident that leaves you with a disability. Or it could be the death of a treasured loved one. A number of you know how these things feel, and a number of you are facing these sorts of trials at the moment. And when it first hits you, sometimes you can feel overwhelmed with shock and sorrow, and you start to wonder, well, what on earth is God up to? How on earth am I going to get through this? And is there some way out of this mess? You know, King David felt that way at times too. In Psalm 55, he puts it really well about his symptoms of the shock and sorrow. My heart pounds in my chest. He's having an anxiety attack. The terror of death assaults me. Fear and trembling overwhelm me, and I can't stop shaking. Oh, that I had wings like a dove, then I would fly away and rest. I would fly far away to the quiet of the wilderness. And so say all of us, yes? I wish I could just get away from all this. I wish it would all just disappear. Friends, like David and like us, Jesus knows that experience too. Come for a moment to perhaps the darkest night in human history. The scene is simple. An orchard of twisted and gnarled olive trees, surrounded by a stone wall and entered through a wooden gate. It's called the Garden of Gethsemane. And Gethsemane means oil press. There was probably one in this garden, and perhaps the disciples used to camp there when they were in Jerusalem for the festivals. After the Jewish Passover meal, a group of people have gone to this garden. 4 of them have left the group and gone a little bit further forward. And of the 4, one has left the rest to go and be by himself to pray. This is Jesus. Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. Can you see that lone figure in the shadows? What's he doing? Flat out on the ground. Face stained with dirt and tears. Eyes wide with fear. His hair matted. An anguished sweat mixed with blood trickles down his face. And there he is, Jesus, in the Garden of Gethsemane. Perhaps you've seen or remember from your childhood an entirely different picture, one a bit more like this. I can remember a picture like this. And there's Jesus, hands folded on a rock, halo on his head, perhaps a full moon, and I seem to remember it was a white robe, a snow white robe, and Jesus serenely praying as if he was preparing for a Sunday school picnic, not the trauma that lay before him. And I don't think that old picture actually is true to the gospel accounts. Jesus has known for some time that it was coming to this. Earlier that evening, Jesus makes it clear to his disciples he's about to give up his body and shed his blood for many. But now, Now the terror of that is just about to unfold. Jesus shares his anguish with his three closest earthly friends, Peter, James, and John. My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. In other words, I'm so sorrowful and sad I could die. The anxiety and dread and despair is crushing the life out of Jesus like olives in an olive press. And what does Jesus ask them to do? Well, can you keep watch? Keep watch and pray. Just hang with me. And what do? They keep nodding off to sleep. At a time when Jesus needs friends like never before, they keep nodding off. And so he is all alone in his sorrow. I don't know about you, but I want to shake those disciples and say, how can you guys sleep at a time like this? Don't you know what he's going through? Jesus wrestles with his desire to live on one hand and his desire to please his Father on the other. And in desperation he cries, my Father, is there some other way? If it's possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me, yet I want your will to be done and not mine. And a bit later he prays, my Father, if this cup cannot be taken away unless I drink it, your will be done. What's this cup? What is it? It's a cup of what? A cup of suffering. Jesus will undergo betrayal, rejection, a series of beatings, a Roman flogging, which often killed its victims just on its own, and then crucifixion, the most brutal means of death probably ever invented. But added to that, drinking this cup to the dregs means bearing God's holy and divine punishment on the sin of humanity, including your sin and mine. Think about that. It's not just the physical. It's the psychological, relational, social. Friends, consider this. In the Nicene Creed, we confess that Jesus, as the Son, is God of God, light of light, very God of very God, begotten, not made, of one substance or of one being with the Father. Now that was put in there to say that Jesus is truly God, but it also tells us that Jesus has had eternal intimacy with the Father from forever. Yet as he bears our guilt and shame, Jesus will be smashed under the hammer of God's judgment. He will drink the cup of death and separation from God. And the Son has never experienced that before. No wonder he is wrestling with the cost. And as a human being, Jesus must trust that without any intervention, the Father will raise him to life again, even though it has never, ever happened before. Pastor Rick Strellan writes, his faith, his courage, his willingness to place his future in the hands of his faithful Father are just as much a risk for him as for us. He, like us, has to place his trust in his Father's faithfulness and in his promises. It wasn't any easier for Jesus facing death than it is for us. And so his self-preservation is indeed healthy and normal, yet Jesus is willing to lay it aside for you and for me and for all eternity. despite the gut-wrenching agony of his soul, Jesus prays, Father, I want your will to be done, not mine. And so in obedience to the Father's will, and for the joy of seeing you and me together with him in eternity, Jesus takes the path of self-sacrifice. And there at the cross is the most humbling act of love the world has ever seen. The worst thing imaginable happening to the best person possible for you and for me. And so, friends, the picture of Jesus we see in the Garden of Gethsemane is one who truly knows our sorrows, yes? In Jesus, we meet a God who knows what it's like to walk in our shoes. No, he is not clothed in a snow-white cloak. He is clothed with our broken humanity. And so, friends, next time you are wandering through the fog of sorrow and think that no one else understands what you're going through, remember Jesus in the garden. Next time your self-pity screams at you, no one cares about you, pay a visit to Gethsemane. And next time you wonder if God knows about human pain on this dusty planet, listen to him pleading amongst the twisted trees, and then follow him from the garden to the cross. God was never nearer to us than when he hurt. As Max Lucado writes, if it is true that in suffering God is most like humanity, then maybe in our suffering we can see God like never before. The next time you are called to suffer, pay attention, watch closely. It could very well be that the hand that extends itself to lead you out of the fog is a pierced one. And that pierced hand also brings us into Jesus' resurrection glory. Friends, God be with you in your sorrow, in your pain, in your hurts, and in your questions. He is with you in those things. And God bring you from them to himself through Jesus into his glory. Amen.